This video is sponsored by Factor. As you guys know, I've been using Factor for a while now, and they remain my favorite food product. Sometimes life gets busy and you just can't find the time to cook a good quality meal, and a lot of delivery food can be expensive and low quality. Factor is my favorite solution for an easy, no-fuss meal. They have plenty of weekly options to fit nearly any diet on their website. They're just a few clicks away. This eliminates the hassle of prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Just heat it up for 2 minutes and enjoy. Plus, you can customize your weekly meals to get as much or as little as you need, while being able to pause or reschedule your deliveries at any time to tailor to your schedule. You can check out some of their options right now by going to factor75.com or clicking the link below and using the code ScareTheater50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next box while your subscription is still active. Factor has remained a consistent, flexible option that I regularly use for a quick way to load up on carbs before the gym or on nights when I just don't want to take the time to go out or cook. I've been using them for a while, and I have never received a single meal that I didn't enjoy as much as something from a high-quality restaurant. I promise I'm not exaggerating. All that for just 2 minutes of heating. This stuff is a godsend. To take advantage of Factor's delicious, fresh, never-frozen meals, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code ScareTheater50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next box. That's code ScareTheater50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. Now, back to the video. Struggling to find meaning in a seemingly meaningless world is something that everyone can relate to. We are born, we experience, then we return to the void forever. And the worst part is, we have to go on with our daily lives fully aware of this. This is the curse of being human. Everyone copes with this knowledge in a different way, many crafting narratives of faith, purpose, and hope to maintain their sanity. Enter Burd, an indie game developed by Awkward Silence Games that ventures deep into the subject, exploring themes of existentialism, morality, and nihilism. From a young age, birds are told of a place called Avolis. This roughly translates to soaring paradise. Birds who serve their flocks and gods well are rewarded with entry to Avolis for eternity. These are dark times. The kingdom of birds has fallen and will not again rise from the ashes. Sound familiar? Already you can see the message isn't so subtle. The game begins with the player respawning into a dark, eerie world. You approach a giant bird sleeping under a cliff. The bird introduces himself to you as a god in need of your help. He requests sustenance in exchange for unimaginable power. And if you're especially good, then you too can enter the paradise that is Avolis. You do as you are told and fetch your god a worm. In return, you gain the ability to fly higher, but the requests don't stop here. God now requests a blood sacrifice in order for you to travel faster. You must eliminate the baby birds you encounter while they sleep. You traverse the map until you come across a flock of baby birds in need of help. Ignore them. They won't help you get to Avolis. As you travel the map, passing obstacles, you cross paths with a series of bird eggs. As God instructs, you destroy them, spilling blood from within. In return, these spots serve as checkpoints that can be used to travel back to God more quickly. As you continue through the environment, you maintain your undying loyalty to God, bringing him back every worm you find in exchange for more power. Eventually you come across this peculiar fella, who I'll call the Observer. He greets you, telling you, "All that I ask is that you consider your choices. Nothing matters." You return another worm to God before encountering the Observer once again, who tells you, "The end is near, little one. You made a lot of choices today. However, you have one more. You'll find the means to an end on the other side of the hill." You continue on to find the final worm. You've come so far. All you need to do is bring this to God, fulfill his requests, and secure your spot in Avolis. You feed God the final worm, and the screen flashes brightly. When the brightness diminishes, you are standing on a platform with the Observer. He says to you, "Little bird, power has led you astray. There's blood on your hands. Paradise only existed as a hope, a dream. Life here could have been paradise, but the kingdom of birds has fallen, and it will not again rise from the ashes. Close your eyes. You're not going to heaven, little bird. You have created despair." The screen permanently fades to black until you close the game. Not the most satisfying ending, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the game is about rejecting blind obedience. Surely just do the opposite and things will turn out better. So you start up and try again. This time you won't be so compliant. This time you take note of the baby birds you ignored earlier, and opt to give the worms to them instead, much to God's displeasure. As you continue your act of rebellion, God's anger continues to grow. You are called a blasphemer, and you are threatened to not disobey again. His wrath manifests through a violent storm that could easily put an end to your progress. But this doesn't scare you. You started this path, now you're going to finish it. You return another worm to the baby birds with no regard to the consequences. At this point, God is done trying to convince you. He warns that he will destroy this world with or without you. You encounter the Observer again, for he reminds you once again to consider your choices. Nothing matters. In a final act of defiance, you bring the last worm to the nest, which erupts with hearts. The screen flashes, and you find yourself once again on the platform with the Observer. This time he says, "Little bird, ignorance has led you astray. The bird under the mountain was there for a reason. While it lived, Avolis could not exist. Life here could have been paradise. But the kingdom of birds has fallen, and it will not again rise from the ashes. Close your eyes. You're not going to heaven, little bird. You don't know how to get there." The screen goes permanently black again. You made very different choices, but the outcome seems to not have really changed. But there's still one more thing you can try. You load in one more time. Just like the last run, you feed all the worms to the baby flock. But this time, you do two things differently. First, you do not break any of the bird eggs you encounter. Note, this makes the game significantly more difficult, as you no longer have any checkpoints. You reach the Observer again, who reminds you for the third time to consider your choices. Nothing matters. You reach the final worm, but before bringing it back, you poison it. You drop this tainted offer into the mouth of God, and now, as Nietzsche puts it, God is dead, and you have killed him. In a sudden flash, you appear on the platform with the Observer. Birds fly above you, leaving a trail of hearts. The Observer says to you, "Little bird, I'm afraid you have been led astray. There is no heaven, but do not fret. The rotten kingdom of birds has fallen, and it will not again rise from the ashes. And instead, you have created the foundations for the paradise you seek for your family. Close your eyes." There is a lot to unpack here. At the very start of the game, it sets the stage by foreshadowing the allegory of humanity that it represents, when it tells us that, from a young age, birds are told of this mystical, soaring paradise that they'll be rewarded with for eternity if they serve their gods. I'm sure this metaphor is lost on no one. The idea of an afterlife has existed since the beginning of humanity itself. It could definitely be argued that the reason this idea has been so prevalent is because of the comfort that it gives people. I think most people fear the idea of death, and what's the best way to work around that? To propose the idea that you never die. If you grew up in a religious household, you will find this particularly relatable. I'm not sure if I remember the first time in my life that I really thought about the concept of dying, but I do have one distinct memory that stands out to me. I grew up Christian, and I remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, my dad was telling me about heaven. It was such an amazing concept, and it's a little humorous to think about now, but I was really excited. Imagine the excitement you'd feel if someone gave you $1 billion right now. That's how I felt. I was genuinely excited to die, which is funny considering that now I'm terrified of dying. But at the time I was young and wasn't really capable of questioning my faith. Let me know in the comments if any of you have experienced something similar to this. If you grew up religious, do you remember your first introduction to the concepts of heaven and hell? The God bird is a metaphor for, surprise surprise, God. The game provides plenty of literal interpretations for this. For instance, he commands the player to blindly follow his orders, with promises of power and eternal life. He demands sacrifices, like many gods throughout history have done. And if you refuse to obey him, he becomes very wrathful. But there's also some slightly more subtle and less literal interpretations of what this character represents. It might not be a connection to a literal god, but rather a representation of leaders of organized religion. Just like the God bird in the game tries to guide your decision making, it isn't all uncommon for religious leaders to use religion as a means to control people. When you look at megachurches and faith healers, it's difficult to distinguish whether the people there are worshiping God or the pastor. Many of these people are very ill-intentioned, controlling people with promises of healing or eternal life. And they can also be similar in the fact that the god bird tells the player to ignore feeding the young, helpless birds, and instead demands you give them all to him. This type of selfishness isn't at all uncommon on the more exploitative side of religion, where a lot of churches profit off of massive untaxed donations from their followers, the majority of which are not being used for selfless causes.
There's a series of documents that total almost $50,000 to limo land. What was that for?
Was to cut the Mercedes into a limo.
This interpretation also brings up an interesting point about the second ending in the game. When you refuse to feed the god bird any worms, yet still allow him to live, you still get a bad ending. In this ending, the observer specifically says, the bird under the mountain was there for a reason. While it lived, Avilice could not exist. Life here could have been paradise. I think the point they are making is that as long as organized religion exists, true peace cannot. The reason it is there is for control. The game makes several references to the kingdom of birds falling and not again rising from the ashes. When things get chaotic and the world is falling apart, it's incredibly comforting to be able to rely on some higher power to make things better or grant the promise of better circumstances in the afterlife. I'm sure you've heard the saying, there are no atheists in foxholes. But the idea of killing the god bird, i.e. religion, was to put power back in the hands of individuals. We don't need to die to reach paradise. As the game says, we can create paradise right here, in this life. Now, I real quickly feel like I should add that, although I've brought up a lot of criticisms of religion, I don't think there's anything wrong with being religious or believing in God. A lot of the examples I've brought up are very specific scenarios. There are religious organizations out there that are filled with good people who do good things. This is more about viewing religion through the lens of the game and explaining why belief in a higher power is such a prevalent thing exclusively for humans. Ultimately, this is a game about nihilism. This is clearly highlighted by the repetition of the observer saying, nothing matters. Being faced with a dark, meaningless world like the one in this game makes the idea of a god that provides purpose a very appealing coping mechanism. But ultimately, the choices you make in the game have no effect on what happens to you as the character in the end. It always ends with you returning to the void. What you can affect, however, is the outcome of what happens after you are gone. You can go the obedient route and leave the world in the disarrayed state you found it in, or you could veer off path, and although you might not experience a better world, the people after you will. A lack of meaning doesn't have to be a depressing thing. It can be freeing knowing that you create whatever meaning you want, or maybe that's just a cope too, I don't know. I know this is a bit of a different topic than I usually cover, but when I played this game, I really wanted to cover it. I've been having a lot of depressing thoughts about existence and meaning lately, so I found this experience very captivating. Did the game help ease my mind on these thoughts? Not really. But it gave me something to think about. Because, in the words of the observer, if nothing matters, why not let there be love? Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the flip side. I want to give a quick shout out to Leafcuts, who created the music for Burd and gave me permission to use the music for this video. I also want to give a quick shout out to Lucky One Guy. On my Patreon page, I've been putting out puzzles for people to solve for small amounts of money, and he solved one of them, so congrats to him.